Ready?
Okay.
Let's call the planning development meeting to order. It's 6 o'clock. Roll call. Ryan Miller. Do you know if he called in? Ryan?
I'm not aware, and I checked
Okay.
with Tammy. He didn't.
Kyle Marshall here. Mary Atkins.
Here.
Kenneth Haynes.
Here.
Christy Kennard.
Here.
Dolores Martin.
Here.
And William Richardson.
Here.
If we would stand for the pledge. Allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America,
and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
I always forget that. Dan got a hold of
Do you know if we have any public comments? I'm assuming no.
No, we didn't see anybody sign up.
it. They have a presentation.
Staff presentation on public hearing item.
So we have a good evening, planning development and zoning commission members. We have a public hearing, and this pertains to a request for a right-of-way abandonment of Russell Street, a portion of Russell Street from Highway 6 to Large Avenue. This street is right next to Bighorn Restaurant, and the applicant is requesting the abandonment so that they can develop the adjoining property on the other side in conjunction with Bighorn. So based on our policies, there is a public hearing requirement at the Planning Development and Zoning Commission. We'll forward y'all's recommendation to City Council, and they're the ones who make a final decision on this. We've included exhibit to show exactly where the portion of the right-of-way is that is requested for being abandoned. We've sent a notification to utility service companies, including Centerpoint. We do see some power lines in that area, but we're guessing that it's to provide service to that building in there on that location. Just for the record, the address of the property that is proposed for development is 7303 Russell Street. And we haven't heard from Centerpoint, but AT&T and some of the other utility companies have reached out and suggested no objection to the right-of-way abandonment. We've looked into utility line locations on that area. We haven't seen any city utility lines in there, but we would continue to investigate into that before the city council meeting. The applicant is here tonight. I believe, do you all have a presentation? Do you all want to talk to the commission on this?
We sure can. If you want more information, or if you, in the interest of time, we're happy to sit as well. So your preference.
Right. So based on everything that we find, staff is recommending approval of the right-of-way abandonment contingent upon payment of all fees and as determined by the appraisal commissioned in connection with this abandonment request, as may be modified by City Council and or other satisfaction that may be needed or is determined by the City Council. At one of our pre-development meetings, we did communicate to the applicant about the need possibly considering improvement of School Road, and this is something that's included in the data sheet that was provided, and maybe construction of sidewalk to see if that can offset any of the fee that gets triggered by this right-of-way abandonment. And we would continue to have that discussion in the future as well. If you all have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
I have a couple of questions. Number one, so are they just going to combine that to make it one, like they'll have the new restaurant and just one big parking lot across where that School Road is? Is that the plan? Oh, there we go. Because I know sometimes when you come in on Russell Street, that drive-through line is long, and it's kind of, I mean, you know, you see it's a little congested right there in the evenings.
See that? So yeah, Russell's kind of right here in the middle. So the idea is that it would basically become like a driveway.
Yeah, parking.
that would- In between, and then would allow head-in parking off of it that would serve both
Yeah, because
sides.
that parking lot, you never can find a place to park.
Yeah, so with this, they'd be able to share
Yeah.
parking without having to cross the street.
Okay, and then there's that's what I was getting, my other question was, there going to be entrances off School
Yeah,
Road?
so, School Road, this would be the main entrance, for this restaurant, and then, this entrance here, but you'd still have this opportunity here.
So you'll still enter where Russell Street was off of,
I think that's the
Kind of.
intent, but is that still the intent, is to, where Russell
Yeah.
is, to leave that as a driveway, but, in the final TIA, that
Right.
would be amended, but
Yeah.
that's the intent, right?
well, you can get TxDOT that's TxDOT approved.
That
You
was-
move it, you're in trouble, buddy.
My biggest thing was the TxDOT entry point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because that other one didn't have, that's what I was wondering on the
Yeah.
new part, but, yeah. Because I go down Russell Road all the time right there, coming from there, and it's a little congested, so it seems like a good use of space.
I'm assuming this is detention in the green space?
Detention back here, yes, sir.
Okay, that's what I thought it was, so.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And just a disclaimer, this is all preliminary. We still have to go through the review process, yes.
Yeah, MEDC's involved in this too, aren't they?
Yes, they
Yeah, I can speak to that as well. So we made an application to the MEDC, and they were able to fund, what they had available. It wasn't what we would have liked, but so we're still continuing to discuss, but we're grateful for what they were able to do. We think it'll really help spur this along.
Thank you.
And I guess while I'm up here, I'll just, Alan Mueller with Gromax Development, representing the applicant, and just for the record, we are in favor of the right-of-way abandonment, so.
Thank you, Alan.
Okay. On to the public hearing?
So,
Oh, this is a lot to read. Do I have to read all this, Bobby?
We like to hear you go back on their copy.
Going to the record, sir.
I know, that's what I said. Okay. Public hearing, to hear input from the public regarding an ordinance of the City of Manvel, Texas, finding and determining that public or convenience and necessity no longer require the continued existence of city right-of-way consisting of a 0.4073 acre tract of land in the Murray V. O'Donnell Survey Abstract Number 470, City of Manvel, Brazoria County, Texas, being that portion of the Russell Street located between South Highway 6 and Large Avenue, vacating, abandoning, and closing said public right-of-way, authorizing the mayor to execute and the city secretary to attest, respectively, quitclaim deeds conveying respective, I lost my place, interest in said abandoned right-of-way to the abutment property owners, providing for severability and containing other provisions relating to the subject. I guess first call?
second call.
For again, well, I know, we already know that one's for. So,
Closing the public hearing, right?
yeah, it's just got to go through the motions. So second call? And third call, closed at 6:04. On to consent agenda, item A, approve final plat of Valencia, section 12. Do I have a motion or any discussion?
So move.
There's 2 items on the consent agenda in case you didn't.
Yeah, we can just approve the whole consent agenda if you want.
Yeah.
Approve the meeting,
A and B.
meeting minutes.
I didn't even say, my bad. Approving the minutes to date as well in the consent agenda.
I'll make a motion to,
it.
I make a
You gonna finish that?
motion to approve A and B on consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Motion passes. Regular agenda. Consideration and possible action to approve and forward with recommendations of the city council, ordinance 2025-0-13.
And you only have to read that part there.
You just have to read it the one time.
You only have to read, because of the ordinance is listed out here, it wasn't in the
Yeah.
public hearing part, but here you can just.
I thought I had to read,
You don't have to read the whole thing. for the
oh, well, that works.
action
So then, get my stakes straight. So any discussion on this? We already did it, but,
Can I ask one question? I don't know if this is proper. Since they're in Old Town Manvel, do they have to do all that stuff, or is that jumping ahead with the sidewalks and?
So the sidewalks are required. With the old original Manvel town site, they have allowance for asphalt road, but I mean, as part of the development, there are minimum standards, and they can always choose to do what is more. In terms of parking, in terms of detention, again, there are requirements, and they just follow. And right now, we've discussed the preliminary plan. However, they have to go through the detailed review process, and even the right-of-way abandonment, depending on what council's decision is in terms of what fee they pay or what they can do in lieu of the fee. All those things would be factored in, irrespective of the location.
Okay, thank you.
Motion to approve.
With conditions.
Motion and a second. All in favor? Opposed? Motion passes. Item B, discussion regarding amendment to the subdivision ordinance. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, I'll try to make this as quick as possible. So we are in the process, I mean, we've been discussing internally within staff to propose an amendment to the subdivision ordinance to address a few things. We are hoping to schedule the public hearing for the first meeting in May, and then take it to the city council, the meeting after that. The biggest or the focus of the amendment would be to amend the boundaries of the original Manvel town site. Right now, the boundaries is Cemetery, Large, McCoy, and the railroad track north of Bissell. Staff is recommending to expand that to Lewis Lane on the north, and then Jordan on the south, and making some changes to the requirements or the allowances within the original Manvel town site as well. And we've included like a red line copy as part of the agenda packet. We're recommending to remove the water and wastewater related provisions in there, because the plan is that city would extend lines within these areas in the near future, and it would also be helpful if development happen and then developers are able to extend the lines in the area as well, or at least partly contribute to that process. We're also hoping to make a change to the zoning district that this allowance applied to. Previously, it was limited to light commercial district. Now, with the boundaries expanding, it would also include residential areas. And we are also thinking about amending the acreage allowance. Previously, it would only be limited to properties that are 5 acres or less. Now, we are trying to make it bigger so that it covers a single block. So if a developer comes or a development is considering one entire block, the provisions of the original Manvel town site would apply to that development. And the biggest item is the allowance to continue as asphalt road for the streets. Right now, outside of town, original Manvel town site, the requirement is that the developer contribute to 1/2 of the street improvement to bring it up to concrete curb and gutter. And now within this area that we are considering expansion, there are asphalt roads that could be improved, and it could allow for development at a reasonable pace. So that's the intent behind it. Now, in addition to that, staff is also looking to see if there are any possible amendments that we need to make to bring more clarity to the ordinance, and maybe fix typos and things of that sort. And one of the issues that we've seen is where the subdivision ordinance applied to both city limits as well as the ETJ area. And then there are certain aspects where the county has jurisdiction in the right-of-way, like, say, for example, sidewalk requirements or street construction requirements, and then due to us not having jurisdiction in the right-of-way, there's back and forth, and just because there are certain things in the ordinance, we have to have the business owner or resident, like potential residents of Manvel, come and get a subdivision variance. So just to avoid some of those back and forth processes, maybe consider some amendment that pertains to that issue. And these are the two areas that we are focusing on right now. However, by the time we bring it to y'all for the first public hearing, if there's anything else that we see, we would include that as well. Did that make sense? Any questions? No?
Why?
I just want to make sure that I understand what you're saying. So if we expand it to Lewis, McCoy, Jordan, and Cemetery, if it goes expanding out, people within Old Town Manvel do not have to do the streets, curbs, and sidewalks. They can just build and have a ditch like what's out there now with the asphalt roads.
That is correct.
Okay, so that would not need to be a variance. It's just that's the way it's going to be. They don't have to come back and go back and forth like you said.
That is correct.
Okay,
But only for properties up to 10 acres
or less.
or less. So if there's a development that's more than 10 acres, then some of those provisions may not apply, and we may have to look into some of the other requirements that we have.
Thank you.
So tell me why. What's the motivation here? Like, why do you want to expand it?
It's because we have existing asphalt roads in some of those areas where we've had recent improvements in the road repairs done, and those roads are existing. And whenever we are looking at, even like somebody building if somebody wants to subdivide or combine two lots and build a home, there are situations where a requirement is triggered for contributing to one half of the street, or even if it's a commercial development, like the 10 acres over here, when they see an existing asphalt road, which is in pretty good shape and recently repaired and improved, and then we have the requirement to do one half concrete on that road, it just becomes a confusing situation where they're like, you already have the street, you just spent money, why would you want us to contribute for one half of the street? And in certain situations, the other half may not happen anytime soon. So we are having that situation of, we have the asphalt road, we are either asking developers to put in money, or in most of the situation, what ends up happening is they get a subdivision variance. So our city engineer's recommendation, and when we look at how things are developed in most of the area, it feels like there are certain areas where the existing asphalt road works. Mm-hmm. Now, because the boundary is not expanded, some of the other areas outside of what the current boundary is, like south of Bissell and north of, say, Large, the asphalt roads are there, and it just seems like it's a little to excess for the area, because all of this area has already had asphalt road all this while.
Right. So, but it's not just the roads, right? You talked about public utilities and things like that also?
Right.
I mean, because there's a lot of residential in this area.
So is the
So like
street?
if you're residential and you have a well and you don't want public utilities, are you going to be forced to go to those public utilities?
No.
Okay.
So what's being removed is, in terms of water, right now the provision says that they may install a water well instead of extending any city water line. But some of the...
I mean, obviously, if you've got 10 acres and it's going to be commercial, you probably want public utilities.
Correct.
But I just know there's a lot of residential in all of this, and
Right, and the residential properties, as long as they have 1 acre, they would have the option of putting in the well and septic. That's not going to be impacted.
Have you guys looked at the costs associated with doing this? And is it a plus or a negative to the city?
Well, asphalt's a whole lot cheaper.
Yeah, asphalt is cheaper, and so most of the streets in the area, of course, there are certain right-of-ways which are not improved and developed. However, there are a lot of streets that are already asphalt and it's existing. So even from a maintenance standpoint, it's a little less cumbersome and less expensive if we expand.
Would you be able to fix Lewis Lane under these conditions, under this ordinance? That road is terrible.
Yes, it is.
And there's ongoing discussions on some improvements on Lewis as well, and some of the other streets within the original Manvel town site area. But like I said, I mean the primary reason is because based on the existing conditions of the street and existing asphalt roads in the area, this seems like a logical expansion of the boundary. And beyond these two streets that we are expanding to, it makes sense because there's like vast areas of undeveloped land and all that. Just because of the existing asphalt road, and it seems reasonable to allow this area to continue asphalt. Like for example, like we have Large, and we stop at Large, but why not Lewis? It's also asphalt and it's been there, and it would be a big costly project to take all of that out and make
That road was
concrete.
just redone.
Exactly. So that's the reasoning behind it. I don't know if I'm
Motivation is
doing a
mostly
great
for
job.
the asphalt roads.
Yes, that's correct.
And most of this that he's talking about is home sites.
Yeah.
There's not very much commercial in that. And with the ditches and asphalt, I think most of us that live in those areas are just fine with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the ditches that are on the south side of the railroad track work just fine.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, so the portion being expanded is mostly residential, and the commercial is limited to Highway 6 on both sides and Large.
But that's already in your plan anyway. I mean, that's
Exactly.
already part of it anyways. It doesn't
Exactly.
really change that.
Exactly.
Maybe a little bit over there off of McCoy between Large and Lewis. Is any of that could potentially, no, I mean, I guess that's all residential too. Maybe on Masters Road. On Masters Road between Large and Lewis might be more commercial, but
Commercial, I guess.
Yeah.
And again, I mean, we'll be revisiting the red line that we provided based on all the input we get. And if at all something needs to change, we'll include that at the first public hearing.
yeah. That's JBH. So you've got it's right there at JBH. It would just be south of JBH. That's where the new EC Mason is.
Yep.
Yeah. And then that's that little, yeah.
All right, if y'all don't have any question, we can move on to the next
do.
item. Okay.
And this is probably going to be more of an email me. When did what y'all consider Old Town Manvel stretch all the way to Cemetery in McCord? Or McCoy Road? Or McCord Road? Because I don't remember it that far out.
I'm not 100% sure, but I believe that's what we have in the ordinance right now, and my recollection, it's always been that in terms of the boundary.
I remember it more as the Four Corners. I don't know what you remember, and yeah, which is basically 1128 and 6. It's like I said, the Four Corners. So, but it could have changed. I just don't remember it. That's why if you can find that, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, I see a 2016 ordinance and then a 2019 ordinance, and my recollection is the 2019 ordinance didn't have much to do with the original Manvel town site area, so I'm guessing it's the 2016 ordinance, but I can definitely research and get
Yeah,
back
it's
with
more
you.
of information.
Sure,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So, I don't either, but I mean, it could have.
Yeah, no.
It's been a lot of changes over the years. So, so that's discussion, no action. Item C, discussion regarding amendment to the zoning ordinance.
So this discussion would be a little more extensive, and I hope I can cover everything briefly. So if you remember, one of the recent SUP applications, we had the situation of medical use and the 24 hours requirement. So one of the solution was to amend the zoning ordinance so that we add the requirement or the hours of operation related condition to all the uses. However, include a language that if there is state requirement of 24 hours operation, then that be allowed, so that it can be uniformly applied across the board, medical uses or
Personal care.
other personal care type of uses. So that is one of the sections that we plan on amending. The other section that we would bring for amendment would be, we are reviewing the North American industry classification system. Right now, the zoning ordinance includes the 2007 version of it, and the most current version, I believe, would be 2024, 2025. We're looking into it to see how significantly different those are. Based on some of the previous applications that we worked, the differences are not very significant. So the zoning ordinance requires that we review it on a timely basis from time to time and see if we need to upgrade the tables, the permitted use table, and to see if we need to adopt the most current version. So that's something that we'll bring forward. In the zoning ordinance, we do not have a specific section that details out the rezoning process. This was something that we wanted to cover last time the zoning ordinance was amended, but we were not able to. It's just going to be spelling out the process for rezoning and falling back on the state code, Texas section from the Texas Local Government Code about rezoning, specifying the requirements, public hearing requirements, and things of that nature. And then we've noticed a few typos that we could fix. But then one of the big items or the new items would be a section that pertains to tree preservation and some changes to the development landscaping requirements that we have. And again, for that, I've included a red line version in the packet. Again, it's a draft. There are certain things that we would add before we bring it to y'all for the first public hearing. We plan on making some additions to the definition section to make sure the ordinance reads well. The current landscaping section of the zoning ordinance does have some language about tree preservation, but it's not strong enough for us to be able to apply. It somewhat sounds like it's optional. So we've taken that out and instead put in some language that protects certain types of trees. And if you go through the language, there are trees which are a certain size and a certain species. Then there are any trees that were approved as a landscaping requirement. Then there are any tree of any size that's identified in the list of protected tree species that is located in the public right-of-way or a property owned by the city, or any tree of any size that serves as a screening between commercial and residential uses. So those are some of the protected trees. And the purpose of the ordinance would be, if any of those protected trees are being removed, city gets an opportunity to review and issue a permit. And if a permit is denied, there is a mechanism by which they can appeal, and city council can waive that requirement or allow them to take the tree down. Additionally, on the development side, with preservation of quality trees, they would get credit for landscaping requirements and benefit development in that regard as well. So one of the things that we are also trying to avoid is indiscriminate clearing of properties, where if there's a beautiful tree, a big tree that adds value to the character of Manvel, it's taken out without any consideration. So that would stop that. And if at all it happens, there is recourse for that in terms of planting new trees or fine and things of that sort. And then the ordinance would also include specific requirements of how tree protection standards on properties being developed, specific criterias for issuing tree removal permit, tree replacement requirements and standards would be included, and then specific tree preservation credits. Right now, the draft that you've received only has a language which says that tree preservation credits would be provided, but we are working towards coming up with a specific number of credits that you get towards your development landscaping, because sometimes it can be tricky because you preserve a large tree, and if you get a lot of credits, it would be missing a lot of trees, so we just want to make sure that the allowance is balanced. In terms of planting of new trees, right now the ordinance requires like 1 tree every 5 parking spaces. And then the development landscaping ordinance also requires planting of trees in the right-of-way, which is something that is not beneficial. So we are removing that requirement of planting of trees in the right-of-way. Instead, the requirement would be to plant 1 tree every 30 feet on the private property side, and then reducing the parking lot requirement from 1 per 5 to 1 per 10 spaces, and then also maybe adding a requirement for the planting area, a minimum size for the planting area. And also changing some language on the height of the shrub, from going from the maximum height provided for it, changing that to shrubs to be maintained at a certain height. So those are some of the big items. Oh, and also we are considering, and even that's not like a final language, we may have some changes to it when the first draft comes to you for the public hearing, adding some language for transitional buffer yard, where if you have a non-residential use coming next to a residential existing development, requirement for a certain landscaping buffer where you can add trees, and also putting the same requirement on the residential side. If a new master plan community comes in, a transitional buffer yard is put along the residential use. So those are some of the things we're considering on the landscape. I know you had a question.
Actually, you answered it.
Huh?
You answered it.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay, great. So those are some of the things that we are considering. If y'all have any questions, I'll be happy. And I know I didn't get into a whole lot of details. The goal was you have the red line version, and if y'all have any ideas, we can discuss it right now. Or if y'all have anything that you would want to share, you can email it individually to myself or our group here, and we'll include that. And just a little background on this. So in the recent past, we've had several development projects where several citizens and several council members witnessed situations where trees were removed indiscriminately, not to mention situations where Centerpoint comes and chops off a tree in an awkward manner to protect their line because the tree was in the right-of-way. And witnessing all of that, it made sense to look into how we can avoid those kind of situations and make sure developers are not just proceeding with with no regard for existing trees and just clear cutting the property. Because a lot of times, I mean, just by pausing, you can always factor in existing trees. And we have so many examples in our area where a development kind of considered existing trees, preserved it, and developed around it. And it's turned out to be a very beautiful development and a valuable addition to the community. So that's what the goal is. And so we had several council members who provided input. Some of the input came from discussions with citizens. So we also had a discussion scheduled with our Parks Board. Unfortunately, we had to cancel that meeting. We have it on the next meeting, which I believe Thursday. You're right, yeah. So we'll be having that discussion with them. And then in terms of the timeline, we have a joint meeting that y'all have on 28th with the city council, but we are planning to include this as the first public hearing on that day when y'all have your meeting, and then get your recommendation and take it to city council for the first reading on 5th of May, and then second reading the 19th of May. So that's the plan.
Can you tell me just the thoughts on like, I know we're talking about tree preservation, all that kind of stuff, but it seems like you're reducing the number of trees required. So, I mean, I get it, right? You're doing a massive development and having a bunch of trees in the way is problematic, but I just wanted the thought process behind that, because I feel like.
So the reduction that we are proposing is the reduction within parking lots. So right now, it's like 1 tree every 5 parking lots.
Wow.
And it is, so what happens is when these trees grow, they're much closer. And then with the canopy and all the leaves and stuff, a lot of times the visibility that some of these buildings need for signage and stuff is completely gone. And plus, that close within the parking lot as well as along the periphery, that becomes a lot of trees to manage.
You have less than your parking lot. It doesn't have,
Enough,
you're limiting parking too.
correct.
Depending on what you plant, the root system.
Could also struggle. And we also looked at how a lot of other communities are approaching it, and this seemed to be a little excessive, like 1 every 5 spaces. And when you're planting it fresh, it
It looks
may not,
fine.
it looks fine.
Years down the road, it doesn't.
Well,
It becomes a
Depends on
huge
what you
problem.
plant, too.
Yeah.
From what you
And
plant.
that's another question. Don't we have it in the ordinance, what type of trees can be planted?
I don't think we have requirements for
Thought we did.
species. Yeah.
Oh, we had that.
That's what they're adding.
There should be.
So I wonder if, have y'all ever talked to an arborist on some of this?
So I did talk to one gentleman briefly and had sent him what we were discussing, and he said he would reach out with some comments. So, but we did talk to a lot of people who were super passionate about trees and preserving trees and making sure there's like we are able to preserve. I mean, a lot of passion involved.
I believe me, I have 75 to 100-year-old oaks sitting on my property, so yeah.
Well, I know all about those.
Yeah, my grandfather planted all that stuff and before that too.
Yeah, but oak trees are there to stay.
Yes. But back to the other thing on that, with the root ball of that, what's on top, so what's on bottom with an oak. So what does that do to a parking lot too? I mean, it's a, and that's what made me think of an arborist of,
Well,
on that
and then
stuff.
when you're talking about really big, old historic trees, like, that's, you're not gonna mess with, the roots are not, the roots aren't the problem there. It's when you're building the new ones and that it becomes problematic.
Yeah.
You're growing the new ones, yeah.
I have some questions, but I'm going to email them to you because
Sure.
of some of the findings that I had. That way,
Sure.
yeah, I'll email them. I'll probably bring them up next Thursday.
Sure.
Okay.
anything else? On to item D, consideration of possible action to direct staff to provide applicants written statements of the conditions for any conditional approvals and the reasons for disapproval of any plans or plats that were not approved per Texas Local Government Code 212.0091.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor? All opposed? Motion passes. And the
Make a motion
final.
to adjourn.
Ah, there, I knew.
Dead gum, woman.
So we got a second? Okay, all in favor?
She's in a hurry to go
All
home.
opposed, motion passes.